Alright, welcome back to the continuation of our CSS tutorial. So in our last class, we did tables and how it can be styled with CSS, applying properties and their corresponding values to tables to beautify them. And as you can see from the screen, this is the output of the table we were able to come out with. So in this video, we'll continue our CSS tutorial, but we'll do a different thing and no longer table. We'll proceed to display. So display is just simply how an element should be arranged on your web page, right? So I'll go ahead and demonstrate it to you right now. Let me navigate back to my code editor. So you see, if we have an element, a div element for example, so we will not use another HTML file. We will still use this table.html file that we have created previously. So if we have div for example, and I said take for instance this contain let's say paragraph hello world, and then we have another we have another this same div that have hello world too. So now how do you think this will render on the web page? Remember I told you that we have block level tags and we have inline level tags. So what I mean by inline level block level tag is that if I declare a div, it will take absolute position. Let's go back and let me show you on the screen. So you see, if you look at the screen here, right, we have a hello world, and then it came down to the next line hello world 2. These are two different divs. So now this makes div a block level tag because if it's an inline level tag, the hello world should be arranged directly at the other side of the second hello world. So let me just change it to second div so that you understand later. So I'll change it to second div. So from second div, I'll change the text to second div, and I think you should have reflected on the screen already. So as you can see, I changed the first div is hello world, the second is second div, so that you understand. So and they are appearing on separate lines because they are the block level tags. So if I come back to my code, I'm going to add a little bit of styling to it so that we will know. I'll say class, I'll just say some div. I will use the same class here. Okay, guess you can see my screen. Alright, so I'll come here, I'll do some div, and I'll say border 1 pixel solid green for example. I'll now say what else do I want to add. Let me add a little padding to make it 30 pixel. So now so if we come back to our screen, you will see it added border to it, and you can see that it is 100% by default. So block level tags by default are 100% and not less than that. So that means it will cover the entire area from beginning till the end. So also the second one is a block level tag, it covers 100%. So for example, now if I add a width, let's say I have a width of 30% to take 30%. So like I explained, we are learning about display currently. So now I'll show you how different display can work on different block levels or inline level types of tags in HTML. So now that we have this, now by default, if you declare a div, your HTML automatically knows that this is a block level. So now that means it is adding a display called block to it. That is what it means. So that means there is a default there is a default display of block always on div, because div is a block level tag in HTML. So now if we refresh, so this is what I'm saying. Sorry, I was not on the screen. I just I guess you saw where I changed the display. So I changed I reduced the size to 30%, and then I changed the display from, okay, I added display block, and I was explaining that by default the div tag in HTML is always having the display type of block. So let me give you another example. So assuming we have span, I will repeat. Oh, I'm supposed to write this in the HTML. Please pardon me. I'll come down here, open a span, and say first span. Right? So if I come here and I do second span, so it will practically tell you that, okay, this span is not a block level tag in HTML, it's an inline level. And what does that mean? So if I refresh, if I go back to the browser and come here, you can see that we have first span here and second span. Even if I come here and I let me go back to the code editor, and create a new this thing for it. I'll use exactly this for it, so that you can observe it better. You see, if I come here under table here and call class some span, then under the second span some span. So watch this. I'll go back to my browser now. You see that because this is let me add a break to it so that it will give a clear separation between those divs and the spans that we have created below. Okay, you can see this the span tag itself is an inline tag here. As you can see, the first one appeared here, the second one appeared here. Why the div tag is by default a block tag. So now if I want to make this span a block type, now all I just need to do is to come to my CSS. Under this span, this thing, I'll add display block. So if I come back to my screen and refresh, display block, okay, so yeah, it's display block, I've added it. So let's go back and refresh. So now that we are refreshed, you see that we have hello world first one here, we have hello world div here, we have the first span, and then we have the second span. So now the display property of CSS, which have a property of which have a value of block, now is now able to give us a block level display here. So you may not understand the use of this now, but in the future we will be dealing more with element arrangement and how you can make either display inline or block. So now I told you by default that a div is a block level type of tag. So for instance, if I want to now, instead of displaying the div to have a block level, I can make it inline. All I just need to do is to come here yeah, some div. I'll now change this one from block to inline. So if I want so you see it, why did it just scatter it that way? I'm coming, let me add some break in between. So let me add some display inline. Did I add any margin, borders, solid, uh, margin left, let's add margin left of 10 pixel and see. Okay. I think there is maybe there is a missing tag somewhere that I have not used. Let me separate this and see. Oh, hello world. Okay. Display inline block. Okay. So let's go back to our code. I explained to you that the div is an inline, is a block level code. So now you see I now wanted it uh, to display side by side. So instead of using the block as the display value for this div, I changed it to inline block. So now even though you wanted it, we wanted it to display inline, but this, since the div tag is a block level type of tag, we needed to specify that even though it is going to be block, but it should be inline block, so it is displaying on one line and displaying block at the same time. So that was why when we came back to the browser and refresh, it gave us this hello world and second div on the same row, right? So you should understand the difference between block and inline block, and the reason why this span that we did below is displaying block is because we specified the display to be um to be block. So now uh by that you already understand display. We have other types of display, values for display, like like flex and all of that. Maybe when we get to there we'll be able to use it. We even have grid and all of that. So when we get to where we'll be working with responsive design, we will use that and you will see how that works. So now the next property, for example, let me show you another thing with what is it called, with, okay. So you see we have this element, right? We have this element on our page. In a situation where I don't want this hello world to display, I can just use display none to actually hide this particular element. So for let me go back to our code. So you see we have a div that powers both the first div and the second div. So if I don't want to add the display, of course if I add display none here, we have another display here, so this one will override the one at the top. But if I bring this one here down, that means this display none will override this display inline block here. So if I come back to our browser and refresh it, you see that both the first div and the second div will disappear, because even it is there, but we commanded the code that it should not display it on the browser, so it is now hiding it from view. Now if I want, let me remove this display none, this property display none. We are going to go and remove it now. It was here under display none, so I'll come here and delete it. So if I come back to my browser and refresh the browser, you see it is now back. So if I want to remove only the first one and leave the second one, all I just need to do is to come back to my code base. I will just hide some. I'll just maybe create hide some, and then I'll put the display type of the display value of the property to be none, right? So if we come back to our browser, nothing happens here. So but if I come and append hide some to one of these elements here, it will disappear. So let's go back and add that. I'll come here, go to my HTML here, then here I can just paste and call hide some, hide hyphen some. So now if we come back here to the browser, you will notice that one of the elements is now hidden from the browser. So that is how the hide works. So that is to also show you that you can call as many selectors within just one class, also for id, right? So in a situation where I want this div to have as many properties, css properties applied to style the contents of a particular element, I can have a class or id and call the selectors there one after the other. All I just need to do is to make sure that I have a space before calling the next I should have a space before calling the next property, the next selector rather. Even if I have another one, another selector, I can also just simply add it here like this, and all of them will work. All of them will work except if you declare some css properties here that conflict with this one. So the ones that are here will automatically override the ones that are here. But if the css properties you have declared here is different from what you have here, you don't have any here, they will all take effect. For example, this hide sum that we have done here, it is automatically displaying displaying it none here, which we have seen here. So even if I add a background color, it will not show. You understand? So there's no need for us to come and add any other thing here. But if I have bg, let's say I have bg color, or let's say bg sum like this, and I come here and I say bg sum, I can come here and do background color and say green like this, or we have used green there as a, I can use yellow. So if I come back to my browser, oh, I've been on the browser all this while. Look at what we did here. I was explaining that these tags that this selector that you create here, you can have multiple selectors added to an element at once and they will all work together. So I went ahead and renamed hide sum from this our css here, and then I call it bg sum, and then I call this bg sum, and then when we went back and transition back to the code editor, right? So the background automatically changed for us here, which you can see on the screen. So that is how the display property work. We will work more with display when we reach a responsive res responsive web design, where your where we want to have different case scenario for display. We will use the advanced form of display to render how our elements will appear on the browser. So The next property we want to talk about is maximum width, right? So the maximum width is an interesting property in it's an interesting property in CSS, such that you can specify actually you see these containers that we have here, this yellow one and the one that have the white background, we specified a width for them, right? But now, if in a situation where we don't want to specify a static width for this container here, we can say that okay, you can have any width depending on the content, but the maximum width should be so so and so. What do I mean? Let's go back to our code editor. Now if you look at this this div here, we added width of 30% here. That means it is constant, it is static. So if we come here and do maximum width, so it should be 30%, it can be 30%. So if we come back to our browser and refresh the screen, you see that it adjusted itself to fit the content of the container. But if the content of the container is too much, the maximum width that this container can contain is only 30%. So let me give you an example. So watch this. Let's go back to our code editor. If I come here, come to the table here, and then generate some static text like lorem if sum. So I just generated static words that should be more than that container. If I come back to the browser, refresh, what you see, it took the entire container, but the maximum width it allocated to this container is 30%. So once the content is more than 30%, it will be collapsing. You see that we see hello world, lorem ipsum dollar seed ahmed. Now it came down to a next text till our text is now contained within 30% of this screen here. So that is exactly what maximum width does, right? You see that this other width that we have here is still uh, taking the position, it's taking the width of the text inside. So even if I come under it too, let's go back to our code editor. If I come here too and I write some random lorem ipsum text, then return back to the browser and refresh the screen, you can see that it also increased it to actually contain the text, but the container itself is not more than 30% of the screen. Remember, 30% plus 30% will make up 60% of the screen, and then the rest of this screen here is how many percent? Is just 40%, because 100 minus 60 of course will give you 40. So now that is how maximum width works. So now let's talk about another property, minimum width. So just as we have maximum width, we also have minimum width. So the minimum width is also can be written as now that we can change this one to minimum. So what this means is that if we go back to our browser, right, let's transition back. If you come here, so it is telling is this supposed to display inline block? Okay, oh okay, so yeah, I get it. So now you see the minimum width this can be is 30%, but the maximum width can be any width, even up to 100%. That was why when we change it now to minimum width, it now cover the entire screen, even though we specified inline block. So minimum width, we say okay, the minimum width this thing can be. Even if I come to my code editor here, let me go back to the code editor. Okay, we're having blank code editor. Why? Okay. Okay, so okay, let's go back to the code editor. So this is our code editor. If I come to the HTML part of things and I remove all the lorem ipsum text, save only second div here, if I refresh it and go back to my browser, you see that even though the text is very small, but the minimum width it is taking is 30%. That is because we have instructed our code here that the minimum width that this property should have, the element should have, should be 30%. That is why it is actually taking the minimum width of 30% on the screen. So that is how minimum width works and how maximum width works. So now there is another thing I want us to talk about now. Another property, very important property we want to talk about is position. So position is an interesting property in CSS. So what does position actually help you to achieve? So position, just as the name implies, help you to position your element within the containers. So for example, let's you see on our browser here, the whole of this space from here till down is the parent container, which is actually the body. So if I create a div, this div that you see here with yellow background is also a container, right? So if I draw a circle and put it inside this container, it will actually appear as a circle. Perfect. Okay, but now the position now will also help us to know where we can place the element within the container. So let me give you an example. So now I will draw a little circle. I think I've shown you how to draw circle before. Let's go back to our code editor. If we come here to draw a circle, you give a width. I'll call it circle like this. So if we give a width of, let's say, 200 pixel, and then height of 200 pixel. I once told you that to achieve a perfect circle, you draw a border radius of half of the width and height. So if I come here and I say the half now should be 100 pixel, if I say border radius 100 pixel, right, it will give us a perfect circle. So if you come inside span here and inside our HTML here, then here, and I say div class circle, now you see we have a div inside a div. That means we have a child container of div inside the parent container, which is now the main div here, which is perfectly okay. So if we come back to our browser, we'll transition back and refresh, we are not seeing it because there's nothing inside it and the circle does not have any background. So let's go and add a background to it. We'll come back here. Since the background is something else already, background color will add white so that it will display for us. So watch, our transition back. Can you see it gave us a circle here? It gave us a circle, as you can see here, right? So now what 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 can we do now with it? I think it's too much. So let's go back to our code editor. It's too much. I'll reduce it to 100, and then normally 50. We now 50 border radius. Now we make this thing round. So but if you don't want it like that, the simple thing is to put 50%, right? Because 50% is always the half of 100. I think it's pretty much straightforward that way. So remember to be using percentage instead. It has given us this it has given us be this now. So now we are now back to using position. Now the position of this element can be altered within the container itself, right? So um, now if I come here, um, if I come inside the circle here and I use the position property of CSS is written as normal position word position. So there are many. So we have static, right? So static means if I make this element static, I come back to my browser and refresh it, that means it will make this place here static relative to this container here. But now let me bring this container outside. So I'll go back to my code editor, copy, or I'll cut it away from the parent container and bring it here. Or let me take it up. So I'll bring it here actually. So once I bring it here and I come back to my browser here, you see now the background there is white. That is why we are not able to see it. So let me adjust the background color to something else. So in our case now I can just use, let me just select any other color that is not white. Okay, so if I transition back to the browser and go back here, you will see it here. Okay, so that means the position of this thing is static relative to the parent container, which is the body. So let's use another property. Let's go back to the code editor and look for another property. We'll look for fixed. So now look at what fixed we do. By default, the position of an element relative to its parent container is relative. So now if I come back here and refresh, you see that this will hang forever there because the position of the container that handle this thing is fixed. So even if I scroll, it will always remain where it is. So that is what position static is. You will be viewing some website. You will see that when you are browsing, you will see that a chatbot will appear by this right hand side. It is there even when you are scrolling the screen, it will still be there. The effect they added to that button, they added here, is a fixed position, so that even if you are scrolling this page, the property or the element itself will remain fixed to the position it is by the right hand side, so that you can easily click on it to chat with customer representative. So that is how the fixed position is. So um now let's move it inside okay, what can we do now again with property? Okay, so let's move it back to inside the another parent container, rather than leaving the body as the parent container. So you see I now moved it here, so it is still static. Let's see if it creates a new effect for us here. You see, even though we moved the container inside, it is still relative to the body. So now how do we stop it so that this element that is here will be relative to the element of the parent container itself? So we have to come to style, we come to our code here, come to the style section, and this our some div here. We can leave a position. relative position relative here. So if you come back to the browser, uh, okay, is it relative? Okay, so that means the static position or the fixed position is relative to the body itself and not to any of the parent container that this thing is fixed into. So let's use a different position, absolute. So now if we use absolute now, that means this container is inside this the container that form this circle is actually inside the parent container, which is this hello world lorem ipsum container itself, right? So now it is now left for us to arrange the x and the y axis to make this container fit into this parent container. So now this is what I mean. Okay, this is what I mean. Um, Now, how do we do that? Let's return back to our code editor. So you see here, I can make that this at the top, it should be 0. So that means this circle is absolutely positioned inside the parent container, and the distance between the top of the container and the top of the parent container and this circle should be 0. So watch, if I come back to the browser and refresh, okay, you see that it has moved up and it is covering the text. So now this is what it means. Let me separate, since we are already displaying it, let me give some gap to the second div so that you can see it very well. And let me add some padding to let me add some padding let me add some padding to the parent container. Padding, or let me even add height. Let's make it 500 pixel as a whole. So we'll now go back to the browser and refresh. So the height is not enough. I think it's too much for us. Let's reduce it to something like 200. So I will save it and transition back to our web page. So now this is what it means. We created a position for this container, this circle container, and we told it that, look, we don't want you to just be inside it. Remember, watch me very well. If I come here and remove this position, for example, I commented it out now. If I transition back, if I go back to my web browser now, watch, it is staying below the text because of course, if you look at the code here, I added the container just below the lorem ipsum text, which is just below the paragraph, right? So but the moment I come here and I add position absolute, that means regardless of whatever the content of the parent container is, remember the parent container is the one that is having the class some div here, regardless of what is there, the position is absolute. The position is absolute. Let's transition and go back here. So the position is absolute, and when something is absolute, it means it is actually the boss, is like the one that should be at the top, right? So that is why it is now like that. So now if I want to move this thing now, sorry, the reason why it is hanging at the top is because if you look at our code here, we told it that it should, even as it is absolute, it should assume the top position. That means it should be 0 away from the top. That was why it flew all the way from the bottom of the container and went to the top here. So if I want it to be at the right hand side, what will I do? I want it to be at the bottom, to the right side of this parent container. All I'll just do, I'll say bottom 0. It will automatically come to the bottom here. So instead of using bottom here, instead of using top, let's use bottom. I'll call it bottom, so that if we transition back, if we go back to the browser now, it will show us, it will take us to this other side. So now if we want to now take it to the right hand side, all we just need to do, we'll come to our code here, and then we'll come to our code here, we'll add right 0. So what this means is that it will appear 0 distance from the bottom and 0 distance from the right. So if we come back to our browser, you see that it will now move from the left hand side by default and now go to the right hand side. So now that the distance is too close, the distance between the bottom and the right is too close, we can just adjust it a little bit to shift away from the wall, so that it doesn't keep touching the wall. So what we'll do is that we'll come back to the code editor and add a little pixel. So we'll say bottom 10 pixel, and then right 10 pixel, 10 pixel. So what this means is that you are going to float to the bottom, but at least shift 10 pixel away from the bottom, and then float to the right but shift 10 pixel away from the bottom. So if we come back to our browser and refresh this, you see it has given us 10 pixel away from the right, 10 pixel away from the bottom, and it is absolutely relative to the parent container. Watch something. If I come here, this some div, which is the parent container, I need you to understand the terms I'm using, right? If you notice very well, this container is the parent to this guy here. This one is like the child of this container. This container itself is the parent to the body container as a whole. I don't know whether it is understood, but this is the parent container to this person. So but this container is a child container to the body, as let's go back to the code. Look at what I'm saying by the body here. Come to HTML, look at the body here. So this div here is a child container to the body because it is wrapped within the body. This is also the child container to the body, but this div is a child container to this div, to this container here, while this one now becomes the parent of this one. This is also a child to this, and this is a parent to this also. So now for you to position your element, absolutely to the parent container, you must always add position relative to the parent container. If not, it will not work. See here now, if we come and comment this out and we'll go back to here and refresh, okay, you see it's actually no longer positioning absolutely, but now what is happening to it is the bottom and the right we use is what is now actually affecting it, right? So it is now no longer relative to, how do I make you get? So it is now no longer relative to the parent container, which is this yellow background. It is now relative to the body, right? It is now directly relative to the body, because even if you don't add relative to the body, it carries it by default. So if you want to control the positions of the children of a container, you must add that it is it is relative to the child container. So that is why but what happened to it, why it's still at this side, is because we added we added top and bottom to it, so it's coming to the we add right to it, so it's coming to the right side of the body and also to the bottom part. So when we if we uncomment this what I mean, if I come and remove this, right, even though the position is still absolute, let me show you what I'm doing. Okay, I came here and remove the bottom right and bottom and we remove bottom and right from there. So if we come here and go back to the browser, right, and refresh it, even though the position here is absolute, it's absolute, but the position of the parent is not showing that it is is relative to the children. That was why the position absolute is not taking effect. So for you to have position relative working, you must always position of the children or the child container to work, you must always add the parent container to have a relative position. And when you come and refresh, everything goes back to normal as it were before, 10 pixel away from the right and 10 pixel away from the bottom. So we have other properties for position like sticky, where it can stick and all of that. So uh, for now, this is the basic of position. You will understand it better, but let me give you a quick now let's go back to another property called z index. So now, what is z index? So now the z index is just like the stack or order of an element in your html file, and in your html elements, right? So for example, you see I created this element here, I move it to bottom and leave it absolute. So if I come back here and then I remove bottom to be this, right to be this, that means the position will be absolute. All let me leave it as top, let me leave it top, so that it will cover a text, it will just cover the text, right? So now you see if I come back to my browser and refresh, you will notice that it is now covering the text, we are not able to read it. So the only way you can make this child container of this parent container to go below the text is by using z index property in css. So how do you do that? So all I just need to do is to come to my code editor here and use z index of 1. Okay, so this will not automatically bring the text back, right? So if we add now that the z index of this child container is 1, if we change the z index of the paragraph container to be greater than 1, that means this one will stack on top of this one. That is what it simply means. So now let's go back to our code editor. So we'll come here, let's look for paragraph. I'll call this my paragraph here. I'll say z index. I can do position z index, let's do 2 first of all, and let's give it a position of relative like this. So if I come here to my paragraph, I'm going to save it first of all. So now that I've saved it, I want to come to this paragraph and add a class to it and call it my paragraph. With this now, I can change the color and adjust the paragraph as I deem fit. So if I come here and change back to the browser here now, you will see that the color, let me change the color so that maybe you can see it better. So I'll come here to my paragraph here and do color white. So let's go back to our browser and refresh it. Do you think this color is okay? Not exactly, but you can see that the stacking, the order in which the child element appears on the parent container has been ordered, where now the text, which is the paragraph, is now appearing on this circle. So that is what Z index will help you to do. It can help you to order it can help you to order the stack in which elements appear on each other, right? It can help you to determine the order in which, and remember, okay, so remember, let me make a clarification here. Remember that if you don't add position, this position to all your elements, right, you cannot be able to order the index. So for you to remember, the default position is supposed to be relative, so even if you are relative to it, that means it is still relative to the div. It is not absolute, it's not static, but it is relative. But for you to work with this Z index, you must always add the position property of CSS to it. So that is all. Just know that Z index is used to stack the order in which element should appear, and all of that. So that will be it. We'll continue in the next video.